How much should you pay attention to your heart rate when you run?
Whether you're glued to it or not, we want to go through what you need to know about heart rate and running.
So we're going to talk you through heart rate variability, resting heart rate and heart rate zones. All things that can help you become a more efficient runner. Let's get stuck in.
So first up, a feature that I personally absolutely love because it's such a good measure of your overall well-being, and it's used a lot by some very clever watch features to tell you when you're ready for your next hardest training session or when you need to recover, and that is heart rate variability, or HRV, which is a measure of the gap between your heartbeats.
You might think your heart is like a metronome beating evenly and that the more even, the better. But the opposite is actually true.
Right, so now I'm going to try and get scientific whilst also running in zone 4 for my heart rate, but more on that in a minute. So our hearts are controlled by our autonomic nervous system, and there are two branches that stem from it, the sympathetic and the parasympathetic.
The sympathetic branch is active when you're under stress, meaning typically your heart rate is higher and your heartbeat rhythm is more regular.
Whereas, if you're more relaxed, it's the parasympathetic branch that's active, leading to a lower heart rate and a less regimented heartbeat rhythm.
HRV is higher when you are less stressed. A lower HRV compared to your baseline could mean that your body is run down and you might need some more recovery. HRV is a great one to look at after a heavy work schedule, a big race, or when you are traveling a lot. And it's definitely a good indicator of where your nervous system is at and when you're ready to train hard again.
So, do you have an HRV score on your watch? What is it saying right now? Let us know in the comments, and if you have any other questions about HRV. But since we're here, Mo, what is yours?
Just getting mine up. It's 87.
Oh, but that is very, very unbalanced, whereas mine is 88, and that is, well, just about balanced.
Green. I find that so interesting, why mine's like in the red and yours is in the green, and we're basically.
But when you woke up, it must have been, it was all right. Your last night average, so you're getting back there, but what's your 4-week average? Because mine is fully in, I am quite proud of how in the green it is, and I both preempt and recover hard from when I do stuff. Now, we had a whole weekend away.
Yeah, and you could just see where mine just takes
it
the
just
dip.
drops off the cliff.
It's the stress of work. It's really the stress of just having to see and speak to people.
But it shows what we did at the weekend. That was like a full 9 till 6 day of chatting to people, staying up later than normal, having a different routine, and actually that is kind of like mimicking a big running event, and it just goes to show, like right now you're probably back to training as normal, feeling fine, but your HRV is screaming at you that actually it was quite a big weekend.
It was tough for me for sure, but that's HRV.
Okay, so now on to resting heart rate. What is it, and why is it more important than you might think?
It can help you spot illness and fatigue early, but simply put, your resting heart rate is the amount of times that your heart beats per minute while at rest. And the best time to take it is when you're sat down or lying down and completely calm. In fact, when Andy was training for his Olympics, he would take it first thing in the morning as soon as he woke up.
The average resting heart rate is between 60 to 100, but it can vary. Also, it's common for athletes and runners to have a lower resting heart rate. For some athletes, it can be as low as 30 to 40 BPM. However, this is affected by things such as age, fitness level, medications, humidity, temperature, and stress levels.
You can check your own heart rate by using your index finger and your middle finger and placing it on your wrist just below your thumb side. And you want to count for a full minute for the most accurate results. And don't use your thumb, as it has a pulse of its own.
Many smartwatches now tell you your heart rate for you though, and you can also get arm or chest straps for potentially more accurate data, as factors like skin tone and tattoos can affect the accuracy of wrist-based heart rate data.
Your heart rate can stay elevated for 1 to 2 hours after strenuous exercise, and don't forget that caffeine can also keep it elevated, so make sure you factor that in when measuring.
So the best time to check your resting heart rate is first thing in the morning before you get out of bed. But long term, how does running affect your resting heart rate?
Regular running has been shown to lower your resting heart rate, as it is a form of aerobic exercise.
Your heart has to work harder during exercise to supply oxygen-rich blood to your muscles. That means that over time, your heart becomes more efficient, leading to a lower resting heart rate.
While lower resting heart rate is typically a sign of physical fitness, if you are experiencing any dizziness, fatigue, or general discomfort, you may want to seek help from a medical professional.
If you do have a watch that measures your heart rate data, or you diligently check it every day when you wake up, this can be a great way of spotting the first signs of illness, or if you're feeling a bit run down. In fact, your resting heart rate will often be higher than your normal average before you start feeling symptoms of illness or a cold. In fact, have a look at your watch data right now and see if you can spot the last time you were ill. Let me know in the comments what you find. During cardio exercise like running, your heart rate becomes elevated, so knowing what your heart rate is whilst you're running is a good measure of how hard you're working. Also, if you're able to know what heart rate zones you're working in, it's a good way of maximising your training benefits and recovery.
You may find that your heart rate varies from run to run depending on how you feel that day. A run that felt easy one day might feel difficult the next depending on multiple factors such as illness, stress, life circumstances, or even poor sleep. And that's why it's always a good idea to keep an eye on your heart rate when you're running.
So for simplicity, we're going to stick to the most common heart rate zone system, which is also the one used by most Garmin watches, which is the 5-zone system. Zone 1 is the easiest, so that's where your heart rate is the lowest and you're doing easy running. Zone 5 is the hardest. This is where you're working the hardest whilst you're running.
You'll need your max heart rate and resting heart rate values to figure out your heart rate zones. If you don't know your max heart rate, then don't worry, here's how you figure it out.
There are a few simple formulas that you can do, like the Fox formula, where you minus your age from 220. However, these aren't the most accurate because things like weight, gender, and general fitness affect your heart rate.
So the best way to work it out is to just get running. If you've been wearing a smartwatch while you're doing your interval sessions, it may have already detected a max heart rate. But if not, then another way to work it out is by doing the stress test.
This is an intense workout, so don't attempt this if you're injured or unwell, and if you're unsure, seek medical advice.
To do the stress test, you start off by doing an easy warm-up first, and then to build to a maximum exertion within 10 or 12 minutes of hard effort. So that might be an all-out 2 to 3K effort, just like a race. It could be 2 800 meters or 2 to 3 minute intervals at an all-out effort. Or it could be starting around 5 minutes away from the bottom of a long hill, gradually building speed to the bottom and then running hard up the hill for at least 2 minutes. This will give you a max heart rate figure.
There are a few different ways to calculate your heart rate zones. You could do it as a percentage of your maximum heart rate, but we would suggest doing it as a percentage of your heart rate reserve.
Your heart rate reserve is the beats between your resting heart rate and your max heart rate, so essentially it's the useful range. Now we're going to walk you through what the 5 heart rate zones are, when you use them, and just to make it a little bit harder, we're going to be talking about each of the heart rate zones while running in them.
So zone 1 is 50 to 60% of your heart rate reserve. So if your max heart rate was 180, your resting heart rate was 60, this would be a 50 to 60% of those useful 120 beats in between. Added together with your resting heart rate, that would then give you 120 to 132 beats per minute. This should feel like low exertion exercise, should feel nice and easy, you should be able to hold a conversation, and you should feel nice and relaxed.
Zone 2 running is easy running and should be about 60 to 70% of your heart rate reserve. This is where you would aim to do your recovery runs, your warm-ups and your cool-downs, and full conversations should still be possible. This should be around a 4 or 5 out of 10 effort.
Zone 3 is 70 to 80% of your heart rate reserve, and it's steady aerobic running. You might consider your long runs to be in this zone, and your breathing is starting to get a little bit harder.
Zone 4 is 80 to 90% of your heart rate reserve. It's a hard, sustained effort, so a tempo or a threshold run, and you should only be able to answer questions with a few words.
Finally, zone 5, 90 to 100% of your maximum effort. This will feel hard, it will see you breathing heavily, and it will be very, very close to your maximum. You won't be able to talk, and I'm still talking, so I'm not going hard enough. Let's go!
Let's go, Sarah! That is some fine Zone 5 running. And now that you are clued up on heart rate zones and running, do you have any other questions for us? And if you want to see a presenter take on a stress test to figure out their max heart rate, let us know in the comments.
And whilst you're here, why don't you go and check out the time that me and Andy took on a VO2 max test right here.